All right, welcome to NFL 2021 Week 2, second episode of Outdated and Uneducated. I am at NFL Outdated, and you can find me on Twitter at NFL Outdated and wherever winning fantasy football is happening. And you are?
I am Uneducated Takes. I do win at fantasy football a little bit less than you. You can find me at on Twitter at Uneducated Takes, on YouTube as well. I do a little Vikings content and also do content around the NFL.
Very good content. Very good content indeed. Well, let's just kind of get right into it. Obviously, we've got a Thursday night game going on right here. It's still going on. It's a tight matchup, but
Yeah.
Thursday nights are always kind of interesting. The matchups, whatnot. So this week we got the NFC East again. Some may say NFC least, but
NFC most viewers.
most viewers, yes, yes, yeah. Something about the Giants, Cowboys, all that. But right now, obviously, Giants and the team, the Washington football team. So
Oh
good
yeah.
tight game.
Yeah, no, it's always fun. Like I love the NFC East. Definitely my second favorite division for sure. They're always fun, and they're battling away right now. I'm sure the ending will have some sort of shenanigans because both the Giants and Washington know how to throw a game away. They just know how.
They do that. They do. Well, kind of getting right into it. We have some games to really focus on this week, and I'd like to start with the Rams and Colts.
Oh yeah.
So, obviously the Rams looked fantastic versus the Bears and versus my Bears, right? No surprise there. Stafford, really just kind of like, took the reins, had some fantastic throws, and really what they got him for, right?
Yeah, I mean, everyone on receivers were just running open. Like they were just running wide open, 20 yards down the field, and Stafford hit those throws. If he didn't, it would actually be way more of a problem. Right?
Right.
That would be a big deal. Most of those were all pretty easy. I mean, he had a great game. Like, there's nothing to take away from it negative from Stafford's end. But we still don't really know because apparently that Bears defense has been eroded significantly since what we're used to in 2018. It looks like.
Yeah, and I actually heard on Chicago sports radio this week that maybe Mac is on the decline. So that's not what I want to hear as a Bears fan. But obviously, he can only do so much as a secondary. If they're going to blow assignments like that,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
can't do
Yeah, I
anything
mean,
about that.
yeah, the secondary has kind of gotten dismantled, right? Fuller's gone. There's another. Was this one of the? Who was the safety who you folks got rid of recently? Or am I thinking of someone else?
Oh, yeah, it was a couple years ago we got rid of Adrian Amos.
Oh yeah, there. Okay.
But yeah, I believe
It's
they
just not
did.
the same. It's
It's
just
not.
yeah.
You're right.
They have a
And
couple stars, but like the depth isn't there, the push isn't there up front. They were no threat to a very decent offensive line, but not certainly a dominant one. That we've seen out of LA in the last few years. They don't have enough money for a dominant offensive line anymore.
right,
Since
right.
since their Super Bowl run, but yeah. That was an interesting one. There's some good fantasy in that game though. I believe there was points to be had for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and Van Jefferson kind of surprised everybody, but obviously had the long touchdown, and he did well. Cooper Kupp had over 100 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, Van Jefferson, Woods had a TD. So there was definitely there's going to be some points, I believe, in that offense, and so now with this matchup coming up this week versus the Colts, last year the Colts were a fantastic defense. And they were supposed to be good this year as well. They struggled, obviously against Seattle, right?
Yeah, I was a little surprised about how much the defense struggled, right? I never really expected the Colts to come away with that game, but I expected them to hold, again, in the secondary, right? And the receivers made really good catches, but they were running free. They were just running free, and it's like, well, if you're gonna let Russell Wilson, he can do it with his eyes closed. He's just gonna throw a moon ball. It's gonna leave your screen and then drop back down 3 seconds later in the bucket. Like, what do you can't if you can't pressure them like they couldn't, well, they got a little bit of pressure. Honestly, Quentin Nelson looks like he is still feeling it from that foot surgery. I was surprised at the amount of push he was giving up in pass pro. But yeah, I just didn't like what I saw from the defense at all from the Colts. And I don't see Carson Wentz posing much of a threat at all to this Rams defense.
And right, and that's going to be an issue. Obviously, that's going to be one of the keys. How will, offensively, how well will the Colts do to really, keep up with the Rams? And that's something the Bears tried to do. The 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and obviously that didn't work because you really, when the Rams offense is clicking, you really need to, try to, get, a lot of plays down the field, and the Bears just weren't doing that.
Yeah. And one thing, I mean, and I don't really fault Dalton. I don't think he should be playing right now. I think he would be an excellent backup. It's really strange and really kind of career-threatening that he's being allowed to play right now, especially with what we saw. One thing he does do, which kind of saved his life, and Fields might have actually died back there, is he gets the ball out. So I understand maybe not throwing Fields out in the first game against the best interior defensive player we've maybe ever seen. Right? I do like that Dalton gets the ball out. So he gets it out 2.2 seconds. So he's not going to get crushed. I have a feeling Fields might have been feeling the pain if he was thrown into that situation. I really do want to see if the Bears want to win football games against anything average or above, any competition average or above. Let's say anyone better than the Vikings. They can beat the Vikings with Dalton, but anyone better than them.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
Zimmer always loses to journeyman quarterbacks. They're his kryptonite.
Right.
But anyway, if they want to beat above league average teams, they're gonna need to have a threat on offense, and they just don't. They have good weapons, but you're not gonna be able to push the ball downfield. The play action game, not that the Bears ever really used it, which is another thing that always disappoints me about their offense. It's just not there, and the defense is not going to carry you. You can't go 3 yards with Montgomery, who's an excellent running back, and who did pretty well for fantasy owners, I believe. Right?
He did decent, yeah. Well, here you go. You're depressing me as a Bears fan right away early on. I'm excited for week 2, and I've been listening to Chicago radio all week, and there's so much back and forth, and I'm probably about the same place, maybe not as bad negative as you are toward the Vikings at this point.
Yeah, fair.
For me,
I'm pretty low.
Right, and for me, I didn't expect much from the Bears. Really they need to decide what they want to do, because obviously it sounded like from coaches and everybody that Fields is not, he's made for the moment, and so they're just kind of working him in, but what is that going to mean? Obviously he can make plays. He's definitely going to be in at some point, so it'll be interesting to see that.
Yeah,
so
I would love to see what he could do extending plays for the Bears, because they have the wide receivers, right? Love Mooney, love Robinson. And if you can stay alive in the pocket, and we saw what happened when he's throwing the ball to backup tight ends, for God's sakes, in the preseason. Like, the dude's got a cannon, and he's one of the more accurate throwers we've seen coming out of college. He's ready. He holds the ball too long. So again, I do understand for this first slate of games not playing him. And now we got sidetracked a little bit on the Bears, but I love talking about my NFC North teams.
I'm good with that. I'm good with that. Yeah.
But I understand. I do understand you don't want to kill the kid, right?
Right.
I get that. That's not an offensive line I'd want to play behind, unless I was an Andy Dalton quarterback who could get the ball out in 2.2 seconds every time.
Well, and it's interesting because they talked about that, how in the past he wasn't able to get the ball out, and that was really a focus of the offseason. And I think he led the league this week in that. But then they talked about how that's the hard thing about if you get it out so quickly, you can't allow the receivers to get downfield to get big plays, which they need. And against this Rams defense to keep up, you have to do that. And that'll be interesting. I think when you look at the Colts offense, it almost looks a lot like the Bears offense, right? You got really a question mark at the quarterback. Wentz has in the past done really well, but I don't think they're going to be able to keep up. And that's the thing, even kind of going on a fantasy perspective, obviously with Wentz, I don't want to start him unless I'm in a
Goodness,
two.
no.
Right,
Goodness,
right.
no.
Unless
No.
I'm forced to in a 2 quarterback league in a super flex or whatever.
Yeah, even then, you want a better option on your second QB. Honestly, like, you will play him for sure,
Yeah.
but you want a better option there for sure, especially with the way Quentin Nelson was looking. I'm not confident that he can hold up against Aaron Donald.
So that'll be interesting, kind of going with that with the offensive line, how probably the brightest point or the focus might be this week for the running backs, Taylor, Naheem Hines. I think, he might be one to really target.
Yeah. Are
He
you
might
playing him
have
in full point PPR then? You're slam starting him in full point as a flex?
absolutely have to. I mean, if they have the same game plan where they have to get the ball out, and I think really Hines can do a lot, and if they mix it up between him and Taylor, that could be a good fantasy. That could bring you some points there. But as far as wide receivers, unless I'm in a really, really deep league, I am staying away from their wide receivers this week because, obviously you don't trust Wentz yet. And, obviously with Hilton out, and you don't know what you have yet with who's going to be the number one wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, Pascal or Pittman, and I am not excited about either of those. Pittman, I haven't seen a lot of tape on him this year, but I remember pretty clearly him having one route. And
right.
I'm not sure that he's improved on that, and I'm not sure that Wentz is the quarterback to raise that level, especially against like that secondary. Like, I mean, goodness me, like what are you gonna do? Like you have no one. Pascal gets open. He can get open a little bit, right? But he's not. No one's like afraid, right? No one's putting safety help over the top of Pascal, like right?
Nope.
Like they're gonna be able to. I feel like they're gonna be able to load the box up against this. Now, I know.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I say, obviously, which could be, tough for Taylor and Hines, but obviously they're going to have to focus on that.
And they'll get their volume, right? They'll get their volume, and they're good running backs. That is a good offensive line in the run scheme for sure, based on what I've seen this year. I mean, they did okay against Seattle, I suppose, but we'll definitely see. I do have Henderson in a lot of leagues, switching to the other side of the ball.
Yeah,
and I mean, I'm gonna play him because he's the starting running back for the Rams. But am I confident in that choice?
Well, I wouldn't be all that confident because, it sounds like they're going to get Sonny Michel more involved, right? So, he had, what did he have, like 70 yards. So he did well, I think a lot of people are talking Henderson, so he's not going to be a top tier one. You can, start him with relative confidence, but, it just doesn't get me excited,
No, he's nobody's favorite for sure. He was never who anyone really wanted. He falls to you, you take him, right? You take value when it falls to you. But that's interesting. Yeah,
but,
what do you go ahead?
But I would say, who I do really like this week is Woods. I had someone on Twitter ask me about Kupp. And I don't like. I just don't like the matchup that Kupp has this week. I like Woods, against this defense more so than Kupp. So.
Yeah, no, I do roll a ride or die with my boy Cooper Kupp, but yeah, I can see it. Is he gonna get? You think he's gonna get a lot more attention, and it's just not gonna quite be there for him?
I agree. Yep. Okay. Woods. I think Woods is. I'm actually looking at Woods getting 2 touchdowns here. So.
2 TDs. Yeah, and you made, and I shake my head at that right now, but you made a couple predictions last week that I was like, who the hell is this guy? And then I'm watching the games and I'm like, holy shit.
People usually say that about me anyway, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So if y'all tune back into that old one, if you wanna check the credentials of this advice, he hit on most of his predictions actually, and almost hit on the most egregious one of them all.
The Chiefs one?
Browns over Chiefs, yeah, but that just
close.
happens. That just happens every time
it does.
against the Chiefs, I feel like. It's so unfair.
Well, in one other fantasy focus, I would say, or Higbee. So the Colts have allowed the 3rd fewest tight end fantasy points. So I would stay away from Higbee if you can this week.
Yeah. Yep. And he's nothing you're excited about anyway. So hopefully, there'd be a better option for you. I know some people picked him up as a starter, but that's a bit of a desperate situation.
It is. So I am actually I'm going to go this week. I think the Rams are going to keep it going. They're going to keep it rolling. I am going to, pick them to win. Actually, oh gosh, Are you ready for this?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to say 28-17
28 to
Rams.
17. Yeah, I feel that for sure. I that one jives with me because once again, I just don't think that anything that the Colts have to offer against that defense is gonna. No one's afraid, right?
Right.
Everyone's they're it's a plus matchup across the board, across the
Right.
entire offense. Like there's no plus matchups for the Colts offense.
Right. Right.
Like
And
that's really rare. Like, that almost never happens.
and
Like,
that's tough because
yeah.
as I tend to, in a lot of my leagues, pick, especially if it's a deeper league, pick two defenses.
Hmm.
And I did pick the Colts defense in some leagues because of how well they did last year. And I think they can do well against obviously teams with better matchups.
Yeah.
So I have them on my bench in a few leagues. Hopefully they'll pop versus a couple of lower level teams. But I really think the Rams are looking well, and they are. I think probably one of the favorites in the NFC.
Yeah.
Other than the Bucks, they're still the champs, right?
Yeah,
So
of course. Yeah, they look just as good as they looked last year. Yeah, it's wide open, and pretty much anyone could come out of any of the 49ers. Cardinals look great. I'm not sure. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but anyone who
yeah,
comes out of the West, honestly, has a decent shot at the Super Bowl, I think. If any of those
absolutely.
four teams come out in the wild card or as the division leaders, I think any of them can make a run.
Yeah. Speaking of that, do you want
Yeah.
to talk about the Cardinals
Yeah,
now?
well,
Or
yeah. No, well, not quite the Cardinals. We're going to talk about the Titans going into Seattle,
I like
right?
this one.
And which is why we might mention the Cardinals because they got absolutely lit up. Oh my goodness, that defense was atrocious. And I know Kyler Murray, like that's insane. If you folks missed the game or anything
Hmm.
like that, pull up the highlights. I have never. He looks like Johnny Manziel was supposed to look, right, in your dreams, right?
Right.
He
Right.
looks like Johnny Manziel against college students is what he looks like.
Right.
He's just running around. His release is quick. His decision making is quick. Even when he's running around, he stops on a dime and the ball's out. Like, it's
Yeah.
incredible how his feet just like shift, like through his reads, even when he's on the run. He was all over them. But honestly, I don't think that's it. Like, that can't be it. That defense is, no one was excited about that defense coming in from a personnel standpoint. They have a couple okay players, but largely that's their defense is a non-factor, and they're trying to control the ball and score points.
So, kind of on that point,
Yeah.
back on our last with the Colts wide receivers, they face the Titans next week. So
Oh,
maybe
so
they're a
there you
good
go.
play.
That might
So,
be something, and you want to pick them up a week ahead if that's the
mhm,
case, right? You don't want to
yeah.
wait until everyone gets to take a look at who they're playing this week. So if any of those, I don't think you might be able to find Pascal in a few leagues. I think on
Oh,
the
I think,
waivers right now. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay, yeah, I could see that for sure. Yeah, so those wide receivers might be a really good option next week, and beyond the personnel, the play calling from Shane Bowen was on the defensive side was absolutely horrendous. Like he did the zero blitz again. He did the zero blitz with off coverage in a short yardage situation, and oh surprise, touchdown! Right? But we saw
Interesting.
the
Yeah.
Jets do it last year in an epic tank job to lose that game. He called the exact same coverage, but against Kyler Murray throwing to one of the best wide receiving, throwing to Nuke. He threw it to Nuke, and it's like, oh yeah, it was an automatic first down. He could have thrown to any four of his wide receivers or three. I can't remember if they were in 21 or not. Any three or four of his wide receivers, and it was a first down. But he threw it to Nuke for the touchdown because he had the choice. Because of this like outrageous play calling, that is, I don't see him making. I don't see Shane Bowen making it through the season as the defensive coordinators. If they keep playing like this, someone's got to go.
Oh,
And you are the most expendable if your unit is messing up the most.
well, especially with Vrabel as the coach, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. He's definitely gonna he might chop some heads off for sure. I could see it, and I would start with Bowen, but to be fair, the offense didn't look much better. Chandler Jones 5 sacks and absolutely dominating Tyler Lewan, who has been just an incredible. He's a good tackle. He's been
Absolutely.
good. He got beat up last year. He got real beat up last year, but it must be lingering or something, because Chandler Jones has always been a sack guy,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's always been a sack guy, kind of low pressure rate for the number of sacks he gets. So he's kind of like an interesting statistical anomaly where like he cleans up really well. He doesn't pressure the quarterback as much as the elite defensive ends do, but he gets home more often than he should. But he just had his way up and down that whole line. You can't let 5 sacks against a good left tackle, right? We saw Rashad Hill for the Vikings, a career backup, put up a better defense than that. Than this, like,
Yeah,
he's supposed to be an all pro level tackle, like a borderline anyway. Like no one thinks he's the best in the league, but he's a good player.
he's definitely a name. Yep.
Yeah, right. He's a name, and we've seen him succeed in the past. And I guess sometimes we do get caught up in that. And Chandler Jones is nothing to scoff at, but I don't even put him probably not in the top 5. Maybe he squeezes into the top 10 of defensive end players, right?
Right.
But that was actually really surprising, and I really do think that it might. And I thought this coming into the season, and this is why I was high on the Falcons, which turned out whoops. But I think they're gonna miss Arthur Smith, right? You can keep the same scheme, right? But that's not the same. There is a lot of like the minutia and the feel and like the small details that you have to see in the instant to make a decision for a play call. Like you cannot that does not translate with the scheme. The scheme's great. Everyone loves the outside zone play action scheme. Makes your quarterback look good. Blah blah blah. Explosive offense. But you still have to be an experienced play caller in the league. And I hate to always bring this back to the Vikings, but I know them well. But we saw Clint Kubiak take over for his dad, and it is not the same, right?
Right.
I mean, he knows how to call the plays. He knows the playbook really well. He knows the scheme really well because he's lived it. But he doesn't have the feel for when to do what and like what the small things to look for. And I wonder, right? I don't have that good of an eye where I can say, oh yeah, this, that, or the other. But I wonder if that's going to be a season-long issue. Henry's getting pretty old and for a running back, and I wonder, and I worry about his production really in that case, because he could go back to the old Henry that we saw before Arthur Smith took over when he was drafted in the 2nd, 3rd round in fantasy drafts.
Right. And what do you make of Julio Jones?
Nothing. I mean, he just disappeared. Right?
Well, yeah, but then he even was called up by his coach, right?
Yeah. I missed that. I did miss that. Wait, go into that a little bit.
Well, yeah. So I heard a little bit about it, but obviously he was a dumb personal foul penalty, and his coach called him out and said that dumb expletive stuff that you don't do, and so that's kind of interesting. Obviously, the coach,
you have to make an example of a player like that, right? Because you don't, especially if you're an old school coach, there's a few of them left. There's not many. Vrabel's one of them, who will call out a player on a press conference. There's maybe a handful of coaches left, and it's a delight, honestly. But
right, absolutely.
Yeah, that's and honestly, you're right. Now think about that. That was a really stupid penalty to take. There was no reason to take it. He hasn't proven anything in this town yet, and right now it's not looking good. And they have such a good Brown got some points, right? He got into the end zone, I believe, didn't he? He found it at the end at least.
He did, yeah.
Okay.
He gets his points, right? So
are you worried? Are you worried at all? Because I know he's low volume. Are you worried about the weapons in general? Julio, Henry, and Brown. Are you worried about any of them in particular, or are you worried about the offense at all from a fantasy perspective?
From a fantasy perspective, you can't really worry about Brown and you just and Henry. They're going to get theirs. We've seen that in the past where Henry's had either a slow start or had some bad games. He's going to get his. I assume they're going to get it on track, and they're going to need to with that defense.
Yeah.
But that might be kind of going through the season might be interesting. They might have to go away from Derrick Henry now as well, like knowing their secondary is horrible. If they're going to give up a lot of points, they might be throwing a lot, and that might be more of a focus on, Julio and Brown. So
yeah, I honestly hope so. And this is one thing that this is kind of like a general theory that I have about that style of offense, about the play action wide zone offense. Is that you have already established the run from day one. You put Derrick Henry in the backfield. You could put any running back for San Francisco in the backfield, right?
Right.
Or you put Dalvin Cook in the backfield, and you've been running it for years. right? You don't need to establish the run anymore. And they
Right.
have the receivers there, right? The linebackers will bite. I promise you. You could hand it off to
Hmm.
Henry 5 times in a game, and they would
Yep.
still be biting in the fourth quarter. I guarantee it. So if they need to, they can. And I would like to see more of these offensives do it. I know Sean McVay has taken this offense and really opened it up, and we saw that, right? Opened it all the way up this last
Right.
Sunday, right? And I would like to see some of the other coaches around the league who run this offense open it up a little more, because you've established the run for years. You don't need to establish it every game, right? You can
Right.
throw first, like you can throw to Brown and then run the game out with Henry, right? It's the same thing, right? Except for
Right.
now you're ahead instead of catching up, right?
Right.
And then you can effectively use your run game instead of like pounding your head against a wall until you're behind by a couple touchdowns and then you start to throw, right? So I would like to see that happen going forward for sure.
And so are they going to be behind this week pretty quickly?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess we've only talked about the Titans. That's funny. We
Yeah.
gotta get a little sidetracked there. Yeah,
That's
they're
right,
going to
yeah.
be behind. I didn't see anything meaningful from their defensive line that shows that they're going to pressure any better than a far superior defensive line in the Colts pressured Russell Wilson. Right? That line actually held up a lot better than I was expecting this year. They made some subtle improvements to it. And some, creeping back towards average, right? That's what you do on the lines. You go back if you're bad, you just creep back towards average if you can. And if they can put an average offensive line in front of Russell Wilson right now, with Chris Carson doing the mean things he was doing, he's a mean runner, man. When he gets
He
going,
is. He is.
it's such a crazy offense. I honestly, and that's why the Seahawks with those two receivers, like Lockett, one of the most underrated receivers in the league, perennially, just every
Yeah.
year, one of the most
Yeah.
underrated, and then DK Metcalf, just absolute Megatron incarnate. Like they are going to be outrageous this year if they can keep it up, and if Russ can stay healthy and they can keep him a little safer than they did last year. They don't need to play defense, which is good because their defense is, it's fine. It's okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
It's
they've
okay.
got
They
some
have
good
one or two
players still, but
Yeah.
it's, yeah. My thing with them is, I just don't know if I trust Pete Carroll.
Never did.
Right.
Yeah.
So
From a play calling, from a scheme and play calling perspective, Pete Carroll is a net negative. But he makes up for it by being absolutely elite interpersonally with his players. Right? That guy runs the room like nobody. I bet almost every single player to a man would lay down in front of a train for Pete Carroll. Right?
Yeah.
And that's hard to quantify, but I know for certain that it has a quantifiable value. Right? We don't have the numbers that we can put on that, but there's players willing to go to bat for their coach for years, right? All season and for a decade, right? They've been going to bat for Pete Carroll almost like
Right.
that and they've had success there. And honestly, if that offense and if Pete Carroll can just let them. I know last year they got a little tentative towards the end. They still threw the ball a lot more than people thought. Pete Carroll said they weren't going to, so people assumed because he has that reputation, right? That he likes to run the ball. He's like, oh, we need to run the ball more. But they really didn't. They still had a very high attempts per game towards the end of the season. And I think if they just keep hucking it, why would you not just huck it? If you're Russell Wilson and you have those two wide receivers and you have a decent offensive line and you have a run game that can close out a game for sure, it doesn't need to be a great run game, but you can hand it off. You can hand it off to Carson in the second half, no problem, or you can run play action, anything you want to do. Like, I don't see any reason. They're my favorites out of that division right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Is the Seahawks right now, and I include over the Rams, I think.
Interesting.
I mean, it's a coin flip for me this early in the season for sure. But that offense, it's a better quarterback, it's better receivers, and it's a similar offensive line. And I think that translates, and two really good head coaches, right? But I think that translates more predictably to success. There's a chance that the Rams defense just catches fire and stays healthy, which is really important. Really important that they stay healthy and that they can run away with it for sure. But I think that it's much more sustainable, much more predictable to rely on the better quarterback, the better weapons on offense.
This definitely will be one of the most interesting division races, with those three teams, Cardinals, Rams, and Seahawks. What do you think? What is your prediction then for this week? As
for the final? Yeah, I mean, I think that The Titans will put up 14 to 17 points.
Okay.
So call it 17. Call it 17. They'll kick
Yeah.
a field goal. And I don't see Seattle scoring less than 30 points on these guys. Call it 31 to 17. Honestly,
Okay.
cuz they I mean, and they didn't completely torch the Colts, but there was never any doubt they were going to win that game based on how just effective their offense was.
So that's interesting. That will definitely put the Titans in a hole. If they're 0-2, and if they keep it going, Seattle will be looking great there. Obviously, we'll see what Arizona does, and and I have the Rams winning, so that really could be an interesting race.
A great race. And then we have the 49ers too in that division, and the Cardinals are looking great. Cardinals probably going to mop the floor with my Vikings, though our defense is way better, or the Vikings defense is way better than the Titans defense. Well, it didn't show up very well week 1. I could see it coming in there.
Yeah. I might have a little bit of hope for you in my prediction for that Vikings game with Patrick Peterson, kind of the Patrick Peterson revenge game.
Oh, he'll get fired up.
Yeah.
And he played good. 1 catch, 3 yards. PFF called it 3 for 30, but those were both incorrect classifications. They just said it was his coverage when it wasn't, and he actually called him out on him, which is pretty funny.
So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, that division, and that'll be. And we talk about the Titans because obviously they were so close. They've been so close, the last couple of years, right? And if they're 0-2, that's going to be tough. Going into the rest of the season, to see. I'd have to look at their schedule, but. That would be tough. So
they do have one of the harder schedules because they did make the playoffs last year. I don't think they were they first in that division? I believe
it was either them or the Ravens. I'd have to kind of go back.
Actually, I can't remember. It's funny how it feels.
Speaking of another AFC matchup, a solid one, the Bills and the Dolphins. I really like this one. This one it's so interesting as well because with the Bills at 0-1. And the Dolphins at 1-0. If the Dolphins win this, that's going to be huge in that division. And from a fantasy perspective, Tua was kind of average in that last game. He did what he needed to do, right? We had Jalen Waddle kind of started to show up. He had a decent game. It was 61 yards and a TD. He had some. Explosive plays. Gaskin had some good plays. He had some good receptions, and so he had, he was good out of the backfield, and he had a decent game. It'll be so interesting on offense to see, how Tua continues to work into the offense and mature, and now we've got Will Fuller coming back. Although I saw that. He didn't practice either today or yesterday. They're saying he'll play.
He's gonna play? They say he's gonna play. Okay, good.
I believe
I didn't
so.
Hear that.
Yeah,
that's good. I'm just pulling this up for you now. I'm gonna give you. Keep going. I'm gonna give you a start sit question here at the end of what you're doing.
Perfect. So offensively, you've got some weapons there, and if Tua really kind of matures into his own, and Waddle is a good young player there. So on that side, you've got some great offensive players, and obviously with the Bills, Allen, he kind of had an average game. Would he have? He threw 51 times, 30 of 51 for 270 yards and 1 TD. He did rush for 9 rushes for 49 yards and one fumble. So he's going to get some yards on the ground. Diggs is just elite in his route running, so he's going to get his. He's going to have a big game, I think. Although it's a tough Dolphins defense, it's a tough matchup. Diggs, I still think, is going to get his yards. So
it's probably easier than the matchup they had last week, I would imagine. Maybe not for Diggs in particular, but for the offense, because that is just an elite defensive front that we saw out of the Steelers. And so I would like, from a fantasy perspective and a football perspective, I would like to see some improvements across the board on that offense to prove that it was, hey, look, it was a good defense week 1. It happens. I'm personally, and I've been on this for a while, I am not sold on Allen as a elite NFL QB. He had an elite season, which was a pretty dramatic departure from the other 2/3 of his career, which was fine. Like, totally good.
Yeah.
And he had an elite season behind arguably the best offensive line that doesn't look like the best offensive line anymore. And just kind of like they stayed healthy, their defense played good, and he just had a lot of... Well, he has a high variance play style, and boy, did it hit.
Right. And here's where I can definitely see that point. Obviously see, the results. I'm going to disagree. And here's why, is because of their they don't have any balance on offense, with their running backs. And, can you say, is that his fault or whatever, Zach Moss was a healthy scratch.
So weird. That's
it was
weird to me. I don't understand. And I was never like a huge believer, right? But like,
right.
You can get him on the field. Like, he's a capable player. I never understood why they refuse to use their running backs. I would never, from a fantasy perspective, I have not touched a Bills running back in any league, in any draft for years now.
Absolutely not. So what would your comparison be for Allen, though? Is he more kind of like a Daniel Jones, or?
No.
Okay.
I see him more, and this is one of my prized hot takes. I see him in I'm not calling this per se, but I would not be surprised if he has a career arc not like Carson Wentz, where he had the best offensive line in the league, really good weapons, MVP level play until he tore his Achilles, or no, it was ACL, until he blew his knee out, right? And now all of a sudden he comes back and the line has degraded a little bit, as top offensive lines always do, and all of a sudden everyone's not getting quite as open. Maybe you get a couple injuries. Diggs is not a stranger to the IR. What happens if he goes down, right? So like, you don't get the injury luck, you don't get the line luck, and maybe your variance, instead of hitting 75%, hits 65%, and all of a sudden you're the 12th best quarterback in the league instead of the 3rd best quarterback in the league, right? Like, I could see it easily going down that way. I don't know that it will, but I see a lot of similarities between Carson Wentz and Allen.
That's interesting because, we talked about last week about really a lot of times the receivers making the quarterbacks, and obviously Jalen Hurts looked good, and part of that
was Smith.
Right. And so Smith, I mean, obviously that he made, Hurts did well, but the addition of Smith really helped. And, going back to Josh Allen, Diggs definitely, really elevated Allen. And to your point, we have to see another season of Allen in that elite status, obviously in this, quarterback starved league. If you have someone that does well, they're going to get paid and they're going to get elevated.
Yep, and he earned his paycheck, right? He earned, and back to Stephon Diggs. Every single quarterback who has thrown to Stephon Diggs has gotten a massive payday afterwards. There has, except for Sean Hill, 42-year-old or like 40-year-old Sean Hill, who also looked really good throwing to Stephon Diggs in the one game a couple of years ago.
You got Case Keenum paid, right?
Exactly. He got Case Keenum paid. Yeah. He made Bradford look like Peyton Manning.
Sam Bradford, yeah.
Sam Bradford, who I will die on the Sam Bradford is an excellent QB hill, but we don't need to go there tonight. No one wants to hear that shit.
Wow, that's another hot take for another day. So obviously with this matchup, I think the Dolphins really have a solid defense. For me, oh man, you really, on the Allen stuff, you have me kind of wavering here.
It makes sense. It might not happen, but you have to admit that you see it a little bit. But I'm rooting for Allen. I want the Bills to be good. I want Allen to be good. I want that to be a dynasty in the AFC. I would love to see Buffalo be a dynasty in the AFC.
Absolutely, yeah. On my Twitter, I brought up, who would you like to see if it's not your team? Who would you like to see in the Super Bowl? I didn't pick Buffalo, but I would love to see them in the
Yeah.
Super Bowl. I like to see different teams, do well. Obviously, that would be a great story, for the Bills to come back and get in the Super Bowl and win it, right?
Yeah, you love it.
But this week, I do have the Bills winning, coming back, and winning 28-24. So I don't quite trust, and I think a lot of people don't either, that quite trust the Dolphins offense. Right now, you can trust Diggs on the Bills and Allen getting it to him, and even Allen running the ball, probably even getting a rushing touchdown.
Sure.
Waddle's going to be good for Tua, but I don't think they have quite enough. So I think the Bills are going to get a much needed win this week, 28-24, over the Dolphins.
I do like that. I do like that line. I'm not confident that the Dolphins can score 24 points in this game. And I'm not super confident in their offense or their defense. Their defense I'm more confident in, especially after this last week. But then again, is the Patriots offense really anything to be like, we're like, oh yeah, we shut them down, right? We shut Daniel Jones and whoever the hell he was throwing to.
Or Mac Jones, right?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Mac Jones. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we shut them down, right? That's a whole different ball game to one of the better throwers, pure throwers of the ball, and one of the better catchers of the ball, right? The Patriots have nothing on the same planet as that combination. So I do like the Bills scoring a lot of points. I'm curious to see if the Dolphins can even put up 24 points the way they play. I really see them scoring not less than 20. That's not true. But I see them not being a high scoring offense, and I would be surprised if they were that close. I could see maybe the Dolphins, because they get a lot of big plays on defense, which is hard to track week to week. But I could see them bringing down the Bills and it being like a 20, 21, 24, 21 or something like that game.
Or even if you have like a defensive touchdown,
Dolphins. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Which I think they're going to need. They're going to need that.
Absolutely. Just to succeed this season in general, they're going to need to continue something that's very hard to continue, which they had last year, which is big plays on defense.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, and so did you want to go on to one more? Or?
Yeah. I do want to talk about the easy game to talk about, the game that people want to watch. I want to talk about the Ravens and the Chiefs real quick. Both those teams doing more or less what we expected of them in week one. I know that the Ravens people call it an upset. That was more of a 50-50 game in my head. It would be. It would have been, that's not a shocking game. That's not a shocking outcome to have the Raiders come out and do that to you. What is a little shocking is how poor that offensive line was for the Ravens. And I am actually pretty worried about them in this game because, the Raiders are good. They're not the Chiefs, right?
No.
And we can start on the offensive side of the ball. The Chiefs have a pretty decent pass rush, not far from elite, but they're good, right? They'll get to the quarterback. And if they had,
especially when it matters, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when you have to pass, right? And they had a couple of largely nobodies. I mean, I don't want to say nobodies on the Raiders, but they had a a couple of guys whose names you don't hear that much. And I'm actually blanking on right now.
On the Raiders' offensive line,
Raiders' defensive line. Yeah,
defensive line.
They were living in the backfield, and if it were anyone besides Deshaun Jackson, that might have been a 6, 7, 8 sack night.
Right.
And I am concerned about that, but they're going to put up points. I said Deshaun Jackson. I meant Lamar. Lamar Jackson's going to put up points on this Chiefs defense, which is, once again, always just good enough, right? They're just which is fine. That's a great strategy. When your offense is that good, you can be just good enough on defense, right? One thing I'm very concerned about, though, I don't see any way the Ravens outscore the Chiefs in this game. Patrick Mahomes is unarguably the best quarterback against the blitz in the NFL, and that is the only arrow in the defensive quiver of the Ravens. They don't have anything else. Their secondaries, it's okay, is fine. But they win by pressuring the quarterback with blitzes, and it's just not going to work. It's not going to work. I mean, they'll get him a couple times maybe, but he's gonna score 30, 40 points on him. There's like I see no way that Patrick Mahomes has less than 3 passing touchdowns in this game.
Well, in our sleeper league, I would like to see that. Obviously, I've got Mahomes. Yeah. And here's the thing with that, he's just him and Hill. I mean, Hill's going to get open.
Yeah, we saw it.
Yeah.
And you almost called that. We talked about it earlier. The Browns controlled the hell out of that game. Perfect game plan.
Yep.
Kevin Stefanski, really wish we didn't let him go as a head coach. This happens every time, right? If you get ahead against the Chiefs, and you better finish perfect, because if you open the door a crack, a couple too many penalties, or you muff a punt, or you have a fumble, and it's just over. It's one play, Tyreek Hill, touchdown, and then it happens in an instant. It's 14 to 21 points on the board in a couple minutes, and there's nothing. I don't think there's any way you can scheme around that, especially the way the Ravens play defense. And I'm not sure with the weapons they have, which maybe we should talk about. There are probably some sneaky starts in there somewhere from a fantasy perspective on the Ravens offense. And they'll put up points for sure, but I don't see them outscoring the Chiefs the way their defenses looked week 1.
Yeah, so on that fantasy for the Ravens, obviously one of the worst parts of the Chiefs, is their defensive line, right? Their defensive front. So, and Tyson Williams, had a decent game. He people really are kind of high on him, and I have him in a few leagues. The one thing, I'm not 100% confident in starting him is because toward the end, they had Latavius Murray in there.
Yeah, he blew a block. He blew a block.
And that's why they had him up.
And they pulled him. I'm pretty sure. I'm not positive, but he blew a block in pass pro, and I think they pulled him for the rest of the game.
That's a good catch.
Which is wild because he was on fire. And
that's a good catch.
I love Tay Train, but
so that's why I wondered if it was that's a good catch there. I didn't see that. I wondered if it was because obviously you trust the veteran,
it could
late
have been
in the game
that, but
too.
Yeah, it absolutely could have been that, but I'm more than 50% that it was because he blew a pass pro, and then they just yanked him because he's a rookie, and you can do that.
Right. So yeah, I mean Tyson Williams, that's kind of a sneaky start. Obviously you're starting Mark Andrews. I just don't know what to make of the wide receivers. Obviously, Marquise Brown is questionable as we kind of look at it. He had a decent game, I believe.
Yeah. What's he? Do you know what he's fighting? I didn't know he was quite. I missed that.
And that could have been from a pass. I mean, he was. Let's see.
Watkins is only good week 1 from the chat, which is a well-known fantasy fact.
Oh yeah, Watkins. Oh yes. Okay, yeah. So Brown, his ankle. He wasn't at Thursday's practice.
Okay. That's not good. You don't want to miss Thursday with an ankle.
No, you don't.
You almost can't start him unless he gets the questionable tag removed on Sunday morning. Then
exactly.
Or, when's this game? This game's Sunday night. Yeah. So you'll know early in the day. You probably just want to start someone over him because it's the Sunday night game, right?
Yeah. As far as the Ravens offense, you can't start a ton of people with confidence. They're going to need to score points. They're going to need to go down the field quite a bit. Obviously Sammy Watkins, he'll need, but yeah, they really don't have anything that's going to scare you.
Someone's getting points from that wide receiver core, but I wouldn't feel good about putting any of them in my lineup outside of a desperation play, really.
Right. So who do you got kind of in this game altogether?
I got the Chiefs, and like it's hard to tell. I'm bad with specific scores, but I want to say the Chiefs score close to 40 points in this game. So maybe like a 38-31 or 38-34, 38-35 type of score line. I could see that for sure because Lamar's going to make it happen. This defense is not good enough. This defense from the Chiefs is not good enough to contain him. But they're going to run away with it. I don't see any. I've seen nothing from this type of like 3-4 all-out blitz. We saw it work really well against Allen, right? It was really well employed against Allen. They have better personnel, the Steelers do, to be able to do that. But this type of 3-4 scheme where you just blitz like crazy and just hold on to your butts is just not gonna fly with the personnel. You would have to have even the Steelers probably couldn't pull it off against Patrick Mahomes. And so that leads me to believe that definitely the Ravens personnel cannot pull it off. Doesn't matter how good the play calling is.
Right. So, obviously obviously this year, if the Ravens do well, it will have to be an MVP type of performance from Lamar to really take over. And I don't see them beating the Chiefs. They've got some good wins, and hopefully coming up, but that's gonna be another
0-2
team.
would be rough, yeah.
Right. So we got Titans 0-2. We predict that's going to be an interesting division as well. I mean,
because the Browns right now seem like they're the front runners. I think that the Vikings' loss to the Bengals will look a little bit better in a month than it looks right now, and so they could get really tight for that wild card spot.
Yeah, well, are you thinking ahead of time?
We got my boy Snapple in the chat right now. He's got Titans pulling the upset this week. He may have missed us talking about it.
Okay.
We were.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, I would love to see it, and he did tweet that out earlier. He's not just memeing. He tweeted it out earlier. So that's if you're listening to this, and you should follow my boy at Snapple Mister on Twitter because he has great stuff.
Fantastic stuff.
But think back to that because that's a hell of a call.
That is, and really I think that's what the Titans would need. They would need to, because, really you look at in that division, I think the Browns, they are the team to beat, on paper.
Right now.
Right.
And in September, you never really know until October, but they don't look like they missed a step. And like we talked about last week, that running attack is just so potent.
Yep. Well, I'm ready for another, week 2. We got some good predictions here, and obviously we'll see who's right, who's wrong, all that fun stuff. And
absolutely,
gotta love it.
Great call on the Eagles. I gotta shout it out. A great call on they looked good. Smith looked good, and so I'm deferring to you until further notice on those predictions because I thought you were crazy.
Well, at least on the NFC East stuff, right?
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Because I mean, there's so much to talk about on other, I don't see. Yeah. I like your call on the Bengals. I think that's a great prediction because I see them dominating the Bears this week as well.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. I don't see. Their defense is sneaky good. They have really good safeties. They have a good enough defensive line, which I like, which I love. I like having good enough lines.
Well, right. And I heard on the Chicago radio this week that that's a pretty. I think 3 of the players are making 3 of the defensive front of the Bengals are making like $10 to $15 million a year. So that's very high priced, front line. So
and none of them are like names you would really know either, right? But they paid top dollar for middle of the road. They paid top of the market for the middle road guys, right? Top of the I'm not phrasing it right. They paid, you know what I mean? They paid a little more than they needed to for some middle of the ground guys, and so far through 1 week, paid off. A lot of pressure on Kirk Cousins, not an offensive line that I would like to stand behind personally.
Right.
Anyway, we can't get too far into that. I think we've gone long enough here. It's been awesome. I'm really looking forward to this week. Looking forward to checking out, maybe catching the end of that game. That game end yet? The Giants?
It's close, 29-27. Giants are winning.
Nice.
So it's getting close there. So obviously it's been fun. We'll try to do this every single week. Hopefully we'll a little bit earlier next week, and get some more.
Hopefully a Tuesday, Thursday if we can swing it going forward.
Absolutely. Well, it's been fun. I am NFL Outdated. You can find me on Twitter at NFL Outdated, and as I said, wherever winning fantasy football is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can find me wherever mediocre fantasy football that I talk a lot of shit about is happening. You can find me at Uneducated Takes, and you can find me on Twitter and YouTube under that handle. Shout out once again to Team Zeke, the group that brought us together. We're probably going to try to get some guests on eventually from that group. A lot of good football minds, right, in that group. So I'm excited to go forward with this. I'm just excited for some football, and y'all have a great weekend.
See you later.